and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. Now, as tensions escalate in the Middle East following the recent confrontation involving Iran, the United States and Israel, global energy markets are once again under pressure. Oil prices have surged, with Brent crude trading above $85 a barrel, raising concerns about supply disruptions and the wider impact on global economies. Now, for many African countries that rely heavily on imported refined fuels, such volatility can translate into higher costs and economic strain. But some analysts argue that this moment could also present an opportunity for Africa to strengthen its own energy security, expand refining capacity, and also deepen inter-Africa trade in oil, gas, and renewable energy under the African Continental Free Trade Area. So could global turmoil in the energy markets become a strategic opening for Africa to accelerate its own energy ambitions? And what structural barriers still stand in the way, maybe, for the continent becoming more self-sufficient in energy? Well, to explore these questions, we're now joined by two distinguished voices. Dr Lungile Mashele, who's an energy economist, an author and a public policy commentator who's written extensively on Africa's energy transition and policy choices, and also Dr Pali Lehohla, a former Statistician-General of South Africa and an economic analyst focusing on development and structural transformation. To both of you, a very warm welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ndoro, and my co-discussant.
So maybe a question for both of you, and just to sort of open things up now. When we look at the global picture, and specifically what's happening in Iran, US and Israel, do you think that this external shock could be a game changer for Africa? Let me start with you, Dr. Mashele.
So, I know that we often want to refer to this as an external shock, and we were unprepared. But this has been an ongoing reality, I think, for the last couple of years, from Trump's first term, and now, again, this uncertainty has permeated into our daily lives. Globally, it's almost as though we elected this one president who was in havoc. And so we cannot really talk about shocks anymore. What we should have been discussing, even in the first term, is how do we plan around this? How do we plan around world power shifting? And what do we have to have in place around energy security, energy sovereignty? If you look at food security, also looking at critical minerals, looking at everything that we need, including our ports, our airports, our passages, our transportation, and our logistics. And our world over the last 10 years has been shifting gradually. And unfortunately, as a country, we have not been shifting along with it. Hence, we refer to shocks now, when in reality, this has been coming for some time.
Dr. Lehohla, I guess we had ample warning in terms of Ukraine, Russia, because that did affect us. And our thinkers should have said, okay, if this can happen now in this sector, surely we should have had a plan after that.
Yes, indeed. I think one has to probably borrow some intelligence from the fact that fortune never favors fools. It's in very rare circumstances that that happens. And things come to the prepared, and being prepared all the time is very important. And to be prepared, you really have to think about scenarios and then devise strategies in anticipation of any of the scenarios eventuating. But scenarios are informed by your local conditions. And the local conditions in Africa is that only 4% of the population has particularly energy for cooling. And when you look at the war in the Middle East and, of course, in Ukraine, the global warming, which is seizing us at the moment, seems to be precipitated, and it will be precipitated by the wars that are ravaging. And we have to have ways of mitigating this global warming, because it ravages us as the continent and the developing world, where even cooling doesn't matter. So this has been long coming. We've seen it from the 70s, the 73, I think, the first oil crisis that we had, and then followed by many others, and impacting very negatively on Africa. I must say that Dangote seemed to have heeded the call, and he is walking the right path. Perhaps that's what we have to follow through with him, so that we have energy sufficiency on the continent, and probably also make sure that the African Union works and reflect on ourselves as the continent, because we are not even participating in this war, yet we get the short end of the stick all the time with any other war, be it a Ukraine shortage of wheat. We know now West Africa will be short of bread. Now you'll be short of oil, yet we have plenty of oil on the continent, just because we haven't brought in the value chains of processing.
All right.
And obviously the US will always be fighting us against that, because it has to look at its own special interests. Yes.
Okay, so you've raised an interesting paradox for us. Dr. Mashele, Africa produces significant amounts of oil and gas, yet many African countries still import refined petroleum products. Yes, Dangote has entered the picture, but this paradox still exists. Why is that? We've been producing oil and gas for decades.
At this point, I can only say that it is a choice. It is a wrong choice, but it's a choice nonetheless. If I consider where, for instance, South Africa gets its oil from, mostly from the continent, from Nigeria, Angola. However, we do not refine in country for the most part. We've only got one refinery left, and that belongs to a separate entity. But our refineries have basically shut down, and we've converted most of our refineries into storage. And for the last, let me say, 3 years or so, we've been primarily importing refined product. When you do that, it places you in danger of such geopolitical tensions. It places you in danger of strikes, of your product going off spec, if it's going to be stuck at sea for like a very long time. So luckily for us in South Africa, the fuel is able to move from those countries, refined, come in, into our own country without having to go through that pivotal passage of the Strait of Hormuz. So for the most part, we are insulated. However, what we're not insulated against, and this is the challenging bit, is the price. Remember that the price is determined globally, and we use benchmarks, one of which is Brent. And so if anything happens along the Strait of Hormuz, if anything happens in the Middle East or in Asia or anything, we will feel it purely because of the price, that we import this price into the country. Now, as a forward-looking country, what should we have been doing? One of those things is making sure you have strategic fuel storage, because then it acts as a buffer. So you don't have to go to the market to procure oil in the interim or while prices are so high. You should have a sufficient buffer for the next, let's say, 2 or 3 months that will cover you. And those are the intricacies that we find ourselves in South Africa, where we have not adequately prepared for situations such as this, even though, as Dr. Lehohla accurately points out, since the 70s, we've had multiple fuel crises that have landed us here.
So much as we did in COVID, again, still with you, Dr. Mashele, as we saw with COVID, we started to create manufacturing capacity on the continent and here at home. Are we saying that this should be the final straw for us as a wake-up call in terms of saying we must refine our own oil and supply our own energy needs going forward from this point?
I'm saying that that decision is a good 20 years too late. But we're here now. If we need to make it now, let's make this decision now. This war and previous other wars, and even last year's flare-up with the same players, Iran and the US, is a key indicator that all wars are fought over resources, and particularly when it comes to oil and gas. And if we know this, surely if you have your own domestic resources, you use them. You don't question, you don't want to go into numerous other debates about should we, shouldn't we, and you operate in a geopolitical context that is uncertain, where you've got people that you need to protect, but you also need you also have people that need resources. So if you've got your own oil and your own gas, which in South Africa we do have, you develop it. You look at your upstream, you create jobs, you create entire value chains, you employ people, you use your own resources over and above your coal and your wind and your solar. You export what you can to the rest of the continent, and you try and do many other things to secure yourself. And so that decision, if it was not made 20 years ago, needs to be made urgently. And we've seen other countries where after the Ukraine crisis in the EU, German chancellors, other presidents immediately got up and said, we will be investing in LNG facilities, we will be investing in our own coal, we're going to rapidly increase coal, we are going to get our own gas and our own pipelines and our own floating production storage units, and everybody got on board almost immediately. And within 2 years, they'd insulated themselves somewhat to the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Dr. Lehohla, then, if that is the case, what is actually holding us back? What has been holding us back? Is it just poor decision-making, poor thinking, or are there economic realities that are problematic in terms of raising finance and heavy debt burdens? What's getting in our way?
I think if you engage in scenarios and going into exploring what is available in South Africa, the first thing that we have as a living asset that no other developing country has in quantities and magnitudes, we have it, is our own pensions. This JSE is a 23 trillion rands valued JSE. It is amongst the top 18, I think, in the world. Yet when it comes to poverty, we are the first. And the countries that are within that club of stock exchanges don't have the poverty we have, don't have the inequality we have, don't have the unemployment we have. So the question is, what is this anomaly? If you are looking at a set of simultaneous equations for those, you will say South Africa is certainly an outlier, and you'll say, what are the drivers of this? Suddenly you will find that Milton Friedman is right at the heart of our economic policies, of Adam Smith, of a liberation of trade, and trade is a good thing. Trade is good, but smart trade is better and is best. And if you go with Milton Friedman at the Washington consensus, we find ourselves in this kind of problem, where we actually do not exploit that which we have and become tactical around those things that we don't have. So our economic policies are terribly wrong. I mean, we have the TIC, 3 trillion rands of public servants' money. Of course, you don't want to put the jackal to guard sheep, and that's the problem we have to deal with. But you cannot say, now because I have a jackal that guards sheep, we are going to borrow sheep from elsewhere, because the jackal will still eat them anyway. So if we don't face our own problems, we'll always find ourselves having the short end of the stick. We have to borrow from the resources we have at the stock exchange and then use that money as our instruments to change the equation. The ESCOMs, the Transnets, and all those have to borrow from the trillions we have at JSE. instead of these financializing ourselves in the way we have done. We've destroyed our manufacturing base from 25, now 13%. Up has gone the financial sector. And that's the stock market, that's a gambling that we have done. And whenever the shocks come, we find ourselves wanting with the burden of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. If we focus on poverty, inequality, and unemployment, we'll find a different solution. Yet the minister's speech of finance this year was talking about debt to GDP ratio, the primary surplus, and all those things that really, when you look at, are inputs to the system that has led us to where we are. If it starts from the impact of saying we are dealing with poverty, inequality, and unemployment, then the 350 rand that the president provided as tests will have created a new bench of production of agricultural assets so that we start feeding ourselves, so that when we have vicissitudes such as this one's as oil, we are not as badly hurt as we are now. So it depends on scenario building, strategy, and planning. And planning is an art of thinking about the future and comprehensively assessing that situation so that your toolbox deals with these things as and then they come. Right. When we don't have scenarios like we don't have in the country now, forget it. We'll find ourselves always getting the short end.
Talking about planning and thinking about the future, as the Statistician-General, you were producing copious amounts of data, and we continue to do that. And this is a Pan-African story, some better than others. Do you think that our leaders have been using the data that you produce to the right effect? Because that data, I'm sure, would have told us that our dependency on foreign oil and etc. would have rung alarm bells a long time ago.
Well, if they use them at all, would be in a different, at least a better space, not a 1% growth. That's the only number they use. That one of GDP. That's what they focus on, as though we eat GDP. Now they focus on the wrong metrics, and then of course it's the pass rate, and they look at percentage growth, and then that's what they focus on. This year we have gone by 0.5%. All those are abuse. It's abuse of measurement, complete abuse of measurement. You cannot grow an ox by measuring it every day. You grow it by having instruments, new instruments of power that will feed the ox, and then it will get better. Let me tell you what I've done since I retired. I've actually got a ledger. And when I look at this ledger with 2,752 instruments, each time I put those together, which are now your economic planning instruments, they point to the wrong things that we are doing all the time. And they suggest that we have to change course. Be it at the local level, at every level, these things are saying Santin cannot sit side by side with Alex and we are happy. Santin must be able to contribute to the development of Alex. It's an anomaly. We cannot have South Africa city space with the zip that it has. That hierarchy of space tells us that we have gotten a parasitic state that is a vassal state to the rest of the world.
All right. We're running out of time, so I'm going to march us on a little bit quicker now, going forwards with your permission. Dr. Mashele, we've been talking very South Africa at the moment, but I do want us to broaden this to a Pan-African question, because I suspect that we probably need to work together, because each country has a resource that can be for the greater good of larger areas and not just for, so for example, the Great Lakes, hydroelectric power becomes a solution. Other countries have more solar energy. Do you think there are enough conversations happening across Africa that we can say, let's work together, much in the same way that the Europeans dealt with the Ukraine question?
So I think there are enough conversations that have been occurring and that have occurred over the last 20 years. What I don't think we've had enough of is implementation. We are well aware that South Africa, for instance, is heavy on uranium, also has coal, solar, as well as wind. And if you look at Mozambique, they've got gas. If you look at Namibia, they've also got gas. They've got oil as well. And, Zimbabwe, Zambia, hydro, and all of these countries form part of what we call the Southern African Power Pool. They are interconnected, and they are able to buy and sell electricity on a market. And obviously, this needs to scale up to the rest of the continent and then create the East African Power Pool connected to that, perhaps even the West African Power Pool. What basically stops us at this point is interconnectors between these countries, and not just one or DC direct current interconnector. You are looking for more AC, you're looking for different areas where you're able to connect from the Northern Cape, where they've got solar, move to other areas. So that certainly is there, but it's about, can we move with haste and implementation? Oil easily found along Angola, Nigeria, they've got refining capability, so that is not an issue. But you have to ask yourself why some other African countries want to buy their oil from the trade partners that are outside of Africa. And it goes to what Dr. Lehohla was actually saying, that trade is fine, but smart trade is even better. And to your point, that stop looking inward. I think the rest of the world is teaching us that they are looking inward, and they are looking at how they can develop themselves and protect themselves. And Africans need to sit and say, how do we develop ourselves? How do we protect ourselves and our resources? And how do we make sure that our people benefit first?
Yeah. As I hear both of you talking, I keep sadly hearing the same kind of message coming through, is that it's our decision making that's problematic. And yet I'm talking to academics and intellectuals such as you, which means we have the intellectual capacity to make better decisions. Why isn't your thinking translating into policy at government level, Dr. Mashele?
At this point, I am convinced that there's no political will at all. You cannot, in 2026, still be debating whether you need oil, gas, whether you should be investing in it. Wars, since the beginning of time, have been telling us you need to ensure you have energy security and energy sovereignty. Those are sacrosanct. And in this country, we allow foreign players to come in and to tell us all kinds of things. But in reality, you have 60-odd million people that are here. You have the highest level of unemployment. You have high levels of poverty, the highest level of inequality. But somebody from outside wearing a shiny blue suit is going to tell you not to invest in certain resources. Do you think anybody would walk into the Oval Office or walk into the EU Parliament and tell them, don't do 1, 2, 3, because it makes sense for some other nation thousands of kilometers away? Impossible. But we are allowing it as South Africans and as Africans. And with that, I suggest that we start looking inward, because the problem is not outside, it's within us.
Dr. Lehohla, is there a role for institutions like the African Development Bank, regional development banks, sovereign funds, in helping us develop our own capacity much quicker?
But Traore has just shown it. Nkrumah tried it, they killed him. Lumumba tried it, they killed him. Traore has managed to survive, and he's gotten other two men around him to show that it can be done. Now we got the AU that says, well, you went up there wrongly, and we are isolating him. But I think the Africans are saying perhaps it's not so much going through the military route, but there's something completely rotten, which is Traore has shown that we can actually control our resources. So those are the things that we have to deal with. Poverty is ours, unemployment is ours, inequality and disease are ours. So why don't we fix them? They are our own diseases. They are fleas of our dog. We are the dog. Now we cannot go and get another dog to try and remove our fleas. It will not. It will shun us. It will not come and take the fleas where they are because they will say we'll poison them. So here is the point. There are a few things that we as technocrats have, but the politicians are shunning this because they get a wrong voice. The IMF and the World Bank has destroyed our treasuries and our reserve banks until today still believe in the IMF and the World Bank, which Trump has walked away from, and we are still clinging to that share. And the world is walking away from those things that have undermined that so badly. That day, Ndoro, I really wish you should see what I've provided for here. It is anchored on Mhlomi's thinking. Brenda Mhlomi says, what is a responsible leader? Mhlomi was born in 1720 in the Free State. He created the thinking in Mushweshwe, a different thinking about a responsible leader. And he defines a responsible leader in this way. A responsible leader is one who knows himself or herself, knows the people that he works with, his society. He actually mobilizes stakeholders for productive alliances. Through productive alliances, he does that. He uses new instruments of power to guarantee intergenerational value. All that is done through integrated reporting. You don't have systems running all over. Some of in your shelf that the president uses on the National Youth Service that thing, and then avoids the statisticians' results. If you start doing that, you create outlets that are illegal in your system, that undermine that system. So I'm agreeing with Dr. Mashele that will is not there, even when the evidence is in front of them. So if we go with Mhlomi on guaranteeing generational value, which is the future must be better than the current, then we'll do the right thing. At the moment, the future is going to be worse than the current.
Okay, we're running out of time, but perhaps as a final question, Dr. Mashele, if this war carries on longer than Donald Trump thinks it will, and it's likely given the history that we know about these conflicts, particularly in the Middle East, what do you see for us as a continent going forward? Because oil and gas is a key fuel for all of our economies. And can we fix things quickly enough to mitigate the effect?
I don't think we can fix things at the moment. I think we can just make plans for the next 10 years and execute as fast as we possibly can. But what if this becomes a prolonged war? You are going to find global strife. Already they've hit tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. This is definitely going to increase the price of oil again, as we saw within just the last couple of days. And like I said, remember that we import this price of oil into our own fuel price as South Africans. Once the price goes up of fuel, food is going to be next. Then it trickles down into other things such as electricity, being able to access healthcare also becomes a bit tricky. You've got issues around aviation. It has a knock-on effect on that particular industry. Fertilizer, there's just a knock-on effect on anything that you can think of. And once they start hitting your oil and your gas, as they've hit like your Saudi Aramco facilities, what follows next is that they're going to start hitting water desalination plants. And once you get to that point, then it means that the Middle East desert area as it is not going to have water. So it cascades into so many things of our lives, and we will not be spared as Africans because unfortunately we did not prepare adequately for something that has been in the making for the last 50, 60 years.
And finally, Dr. Lehohla, you're standing at the African Union. All the heads of state are there. In a minute, what do you tell them?
Well, if you didn't do it yesterday, the next best time is now. There's no other way. We cannot be dismantling our coal plants like Komati. in the face of Germany going on coal. We cannot be going the wrong way all the time. So the next best moment is now. If there's a problem and it's existential, the sequence of how you use your time is very important. You will use the first 55 minutes on the plan, and then you will lose the last 5 minutes on the execution. Unfortunately, we spend all the time on trying to execute wrong things and not spend enough time on planning or understanding what it is that is coming through us. We got to learn that art of Einstein, that if it's existential, spend the first 55 minutes thinking hard on the plan, and then the last 5 minutes on the execution.
To both of you, Dr Lungile Mashele and Dr Pali Lehohla, thank you so much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations. Your thoughts and insights greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
And those are our guests telling us that we can and should have done so much already by now. But I guess it's never too late. If we just make the right decisions with the information that we already have, we can turn things around. But in the short term, inevitably, I think the continent is going to face quite a bit of pain as a result of what we're seeing in the Middle East, this conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran, specifically also if it continues longer than planned. And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Channel Africa Conversations. Thanks so much indeed for tuning in. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. On your screen now, you're probably seeing our email address and other social media platforms where you can contact us and comment on what you're seeing. What I'd really like to know is what kind of conversations do you want us to have and with whom? So please get in touch. We look forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, from me and the team, it's been great again. We'll see you again next time. Take care.
You are watching Channel Africa Conversations.